All right, so today we're talking about multi-dimensional arrays, 2D arrays specifically. So if you think back, if an array is like a list, a 2D array is like a table. But when it's actually implemented in memory, a 2D array is an array where each element or each index is also an array. So let me show you. So of course, right here, I have an empty file, empty program. First thing we always need to do is make our class lecture. I believe this is lecture 3. Then we need our main. All right. Once we have that kind of foundation, we can start. So again, remember, an array is like a list. Int numbers equals new int. And let's make this of size 5. And then I want to set each index equal to a number, just a random number. So numbers at index 0, I'm going to set equal to something. Numbers at index 1, I'm going to set equal to something else. Index 2, something. Numbers at index 3 equals something else. And then lastly, numbers at index 4 equals another number. All right, so let's see what this is doing. It should create an array, which again is like a list. And then from there, it should, at each index within our array, set it equal to something. All right, let's visualize this. So we have here on our first line, we create an array, and again, an array is like a list. Then I'm setting each index equal to something. All right, as I go all the way down. So index 0 through 4. But you see total, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 indices. But of course, the indexes of the actual elements go from 0 to 4. All right. I can do this again. And I'm going to do random numbers this time. Java.util.random. All right. So I'm importing the random. And instead of explicitly adding those numbers in there, I'm going to do this in a for loop. For in I equals 0, I is less than numbers. Remember, dot length gets you the full length of that array. I plus plus, I'm going to increment through it. I'm going to say numbers at index I equals, I need a random number generator first of all. So random rand equals new random. And I'm going to say numbers at index I equals rand.nextInt. I'm going to pass in, let's say the max number is going to be 10,000. All right, let's visualize this execution. Again, basically all I'm doing is I create an array of size 5. Then I'm going to iterate through that array and set each index equal to a random number between 0 and 10,000. So we create the random number generator. We create our array. Then we iterate through this. Then we iterate through this and set each index equal to a random number. The first one is 5,604. And you see now I increments to 1. So we go to numbers at index I, which is 1. We're going to go right here. Another random number. Another random number. Another random number. And lastly, another random number. And then we finish off. Any questions about that? Basic arrays. Okay. Because now we're going to talk about 2D arrays.
I have a question. So you can use a for loop, or you can define like what you did at first before you use the for loop. You can say int numbers equals. I mean, before you use the random number stuff.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
All
you
right.
can do that, but say for example, our array is of size 5,000. You wouldn't want to sit there and do 5,000 lines of setting each one. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah.
So it helps to do that in a loop because now, even though this is 5,000, I don't have to change my loop at all because it's still going to go through numbers.length.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So it makes it a little bit more responsive.
Okay.
Any other questions? All right, let's talk about multi-dimensional arrays. So again, if an array is like a list, a multi-dimensional array is like a table. It's basically a list of lists. And by that, I'll show you what that I mean. So to declare a multi-dimensional array, similar to declaring an array, so this right here is how you declare an array. Let me take that line. What is that? Hold on, what is this thing? So this is how you declare an array. This is how you declare a multi-dimensional array, right? So we have two sets of braces, okay? To actually instantiate a multi-dimensional array, it's similar to an array. You go new int, and then the first number is the size of rows you want. How many rows do you want? So let's say we want 5 rows. The second number is how many columns per row. So let's do 5 by 5. And that's a multi-dimensional array, or in this case, a 2D array. You can do more than 2D, but I'm not going to focus on that in this class. So let's visualize this. Let's see. New int. So when we see this, again, it's going to be an array of arrays. See, the first one, our numbers points to this array, and then each index within this array points to a new one. All right. Each index within this array points to a new one. So essentially, the first number sets the size of this array, and then the second number sets the size of the array that each one of these is pointing to. Right? So each one of these successive arrays is going to be of size 5. Let me do that again. Let's change this to a 2 by 5. See, now that first array is size 2. However, each successive array is still size 5. Okay. Another way of looking at this is like a table. So if we create a 2 by 5 array, essentially what we've done is create a table like this. 2 rows by 5 columns for each row. Okay. 2 rows, 5 columns. However, in memory, it's actually a size 2 array that points to size 5 arrays. So now how do we access this? So you can't set these indices equal to anything, but you can set these ones, okay? So the format is, if I want to set something inside this array equal to a number or whatever, you do the name of it, the row, followed by the column that you want to access, okay? So for example, and again, it goes starts from 0 always. So let's say I want to access that first index, 0, 0 equals some number. All right, it's going to do the first row, first column. All right, so we created our multi-dimensional array. And so our first row, first column, so 0 here, points over here, 0 here. You see it set it equal to 340,928. So if I do this again, if I want to do the first row, second column, number 0, 1, set that equal to something. We do the first row, index 0, and then inside that array, index 0. Then we go to the next one. Index 0, index 1. Any questions so far? You can put it in the chat, or you can say it out loud. All right, so again, it's like, think of it like a table, right? I know this visualizing right here doesn't show it as a table, but this is how it actually looks in memory. But think of a 2D array like a table. You have rows and you have columns. The first one, the first number right here represents the row. The second number represents the column, okay? Let's do this one more time. Let's go to the second row, third column. So second row, again, we start at 0 always, so the second one is 1. Third column would be 2, equals some number. Let's visualize that. All right, the first two is what we just did. Now we're going to go to the second row, third column. See that? Second row, which is index 1, and then third column, 0, 1, 2 is the third column. And we end our program. Okay? All right, so there are different ways. So similar to an array where we have the dot length method, multidimensional arrays have dot length as well. If I do system.out, .println, numbers.length, what do you think will print out? Anybody give me an answer, please? If I do numbers.length, what number do you think will print? Somebody, I know somebody knows the answer.
Ask that question one more time.
I'm sorry, both of you were talking.
Probably the first number in the table.
Yeah, so the question was, if I type numbers.length, what will print out? That was the question. So you're right, it will be that first number, right? Because technically numbers points to an array of size 2. Okay. So again, if we create this, you see numbers points to this array and it's of size 2. So if I do numbers.length, it should print out 2. Yep. All right. Now what if I do this? Numbers at index 0.length. What number will print out?
The second.
Yeah.
The second number, 5. Right? Because numbers at index 0, this is an index, is of size 5. All right, so let's see that. So when I create this 2D array, if I go to numbers at index 0, what is that pointing to? Another array. So this array's dot length, which would be 5. Does everybody see that? I can go through it again. So if I do system.out.println numbers.length, and then if I do system.out.println numbers.length. All right, so if I do this, it should print out 2, 5, and 5. Okay. So we create our multidimensional array. Again, numbers, our variable numbers points to this array. Within this array, each index points to another array, right? So the numbers array is a size 5. Each successive array, the numbers array is size 2. Each successive array is size 5, right? So if we print out numbers.length, it's going to be of size 2. We do numbers 0, right? Number 0 points to another array, dot length, it should be 5. If we do numbers 1 at index 1, dot length, this array should be 5 as well. Does that make sense? Everybody, because what I'm about to do next is going to use those dot length methods. So we have to make sure that that makes sense. All right, I would assume they make sense. All right, so what if I want to iterate through this array? Similar to what I did with a single dimensional array, right? With a single dimensional array, you go 4 and I equals 0. I is less than numbers dot length, I plus plus, right? So we iterate through a single dimensional way this way, right? But now that we have a 2D array, we want to iterate through each individual element in that array, okay? Instead of just doing, because remember, if we just do this, we're going to iterate through the rows. But if we want to go through each individual row column combination, we need something called a nested for loop. Basically, all it is another for loop inside this one. Int j equals, we want to start at 0. J is less than. We know that each row of our matrix or our multidimensional array is the same length, right? There is no dynamic lengths, one row being longer than the other. So we can just do numbers at index 0 dot length. Each row is the same length, so that'll apply for each one. Or to be safe, we can do numbers at index I dot length. So each time we go through a new row, we'll get the dot length of that row, j plus plus. Okay, so basically the first for loop goes through all of our rows. Then the second for loop, for each row, we want to go through each column. So we want to get the length of that row and then iterate through each column. So now I'm going to set equals new random. I'm going to set each row, each column, or each index equal to the row number times the column number, right? So numbers at index I, because that's the row, j is the column, equals I times j. I'm just setting it equal to the multiplication of those two numbers. So we visualize this. We create our multidimensional array like we've been doing, right? Again, the first number represents how many rows we have or how many arrays, and then the second number represents the length of those arrays. We're going to do for int I equals 0, so we're going to iterate through this first array, numbers.length, because numbers points here. So it's going to go from 0 to 2. Then the next for loop is going to go through the columns of each successful array. So j starts at 0 as well. So we're going from, we go to this first line here, we're going to say numbers at 0, 0, ij. So numbers at 0, 0 equals I times j should be 0. Yep. We do this again. All of these should equal 0 because I is always going to be 0 for this one. Right? I times j, 0 times 4 is always going to be 0. And then it ends. It ends once it reaches the length of that second array. And we start over. I now becomes 1. But do note, J starts over at 0. All right. Each time we go through this for loop, this new for loop will reset itself. So now we do 1 times 1, and you see the second array gets 1 times 1, 1 times 2, 1 times 3, and 1 times 4. And now that J equals 5, that now is no longer, this condition is no longer true, so it breaks. I equals 2, this condition is no longer true, so that breaks, and then we're done. So that's how you iterate through a multi-dimensional array. Okay. One more time, we can change these up. Instead of I, we would just do, we call this row. 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 And we could call this one call. And this is how I usually do my nested for loop, so I know what exactly I'm doing here. I use names that actually make sense. So right here, the first one is the row. The second one is the column. We'll do I plus 1 times J. All right, so that we won't get all zeros again. This is row. This is column. And I'm going to do call plus 1 as well, so we don't get any zeros. All right, again, we create our multi-dimensional array. Then we go through each one. Row is 0, so 0. Call is 0, so 0, 0. We're going to set that equal to row plus 1, so that'd be 1 times call plus 1, 1. So now we set that equal to 0. So numbers at 0, 0 equals 1. If we go through this again, row is still 0, column is 1. So 1 times 2 is 2. 1 times 3 is 3. 1 times 4 is 4. 1 times 5 is 5. All right. And we're done with that for loop. We go to the next one. Now row equals 1. Call equals 0. All right. Does everybody see what I did there? Does that make sense? If it doesn't, let me know, because I'm going to turn it over to you all to do an example real quick. Okay. So I'm going to assume it makes sense. So inside of the Java Visualizer, this website, right here, I want you all to create a program that keeps track of 2 players, points scored across 5 games. Okay? So there's 2 players and there's 5 games. So what type of table would that look like?
It'd be multi-dimensional. It'd be a 2x5.
Correct, a 2 by 5. So for each player, I want you to randomly generate a number between 0 and 30. All right, and set that number equal to the indices in that array. And I want you to print out each element of the array. Everybody got it?
Can you repeat that, please? Sorry.
I actually have the directions here, so. So it should be 2 by 5. So right here, create a 2 by 5 array, right? Populate array with random integers between, let's do 1 and 30, and actually 0 and 30. Then print out each element of the array. All right. That makes sense? Any questions on what I'm asking for you to do? It's right here. Cool. All right, we'll use the Java Visualizer to write that program real quick, and then we'll review it at the end of class, okay? I'm gonna give you about 15 minutes to write that. I don't think it shouldn't take you that long, but. All right, so let's review this. Again, we're creating a table. For this example, we're going to say it's to keep track of 2 players and their scores across 5 games, right? So we want to create a 2x5 array. And for the scores, we're going to randomly populate our array with numbers between 0 and 30, and then we want to print out each number in that array. So let's create our array. Int double scores equals new int. Again, we want to make it 2 by 5. All right. Now let's run through this. So for int, I'm going to call it row equals 0. Row is less than scores.length. That's how many rows there are. And then row plus plus. The next one, we want to go through each column. So for int call equals 0. Call is less than scores at row, right? That row dot length. Call plus plus. Right? We don't want to go more than what that individual row has. And then we set each index inside our array equal to a random number between 0 and 30. So we do scores at index row by column equals rand.next int. And then we put it in our maximum range, which is 30. So this should set each individual index in our array equal to a random number between 0 and 30. All right. So now to print this out, we pretty much can copy and paste this for loop, right? Because we already know this for loop runs through our whole array. Instead of this line, we want to print out. So we do system.out.println scores at index row by column. And there you go. All right. This for loop sets each index. This for loop will print them all out. Questions before I visualize this?
Hold up, so I see like for the new int you use 2 and 5 instead of, so you don't use 0 and 4. Well, I meant 1 and 4.
Right here.
Yes, sir.
If I do 1 and 4, it's going to create a 1 by 4 length array, right? So technically, if I did 1 and 4, that's technically a one-dimensional array.
Oh, okay. I thought it started at 0.
It does start at 0, but this is the length of them. The indices, right? The indices start at 0. However, the length of them is still, 2 or 5 or whatever it is.
Okay.
All right. If I do a 1 here, we're saying that we want length 1. All right. And it's going to be only one index of 0. So if I do this, just to show you what I mean. If I do a 1 by 4 array, you'll see it's going to create an array of 1 by 4. You see what I'm saying?
Yes, sir.
which essentially is just a one-dimensional array. So we want 2 by 4, or 2 by 5, I'm sorry. And that'll create a 2 by 5 array. So 2 by 5, each one being 5. All right. So we go through this, we row 0, column is 0. So again, we go scores at index row. So scores at 0, and then the column by 0. We're going to set that one equal to a random number, 4. We do this again for each column in this array. So you see row is still equal to 0, but column is 3. So row is 0, column is 3. That's going to be the next one. We do this one last time. And the random number just so happened to be 0. So it didn't score any points that game. If we do this again, now row equals 1. Column again is 0. So we go to 1, 0. Set it equal to a random number. Column now equals 1. So we go to scores 1, 1. Random number. And just 8 again. Then 16, 15, then 4. And then we go back up here, row increments again to 2. Well, now we're beyond scores.length, right? We want row to be less than scores.length. Now it equals scores.length. So we break out of that for loop and go down to this one. And this one iterates through each row and column. So the first one it prints out is row 0, column 0. So row 0, column 0, which is 4. Then row 0, column 1, which is 8. And this is our output down here, just why. Then it should be 28, then 22, then 0. Then we go to our next row. So we should print out 8, 8, 16, 15, and 17. 8, 8, 16, 15, and 17. Then it breaks, and we're done. That makes sense? Again, if you have any questions, you of course can write it to me in the chat, ask me in class, or send me an email.
And can you put that in like in NetBeans so I can see what that really looks like?
Sure. I don't think my NetBeans works actually. Let me see. For some reason. Yeah, so it's not. I'll have to find my JDK. Come on, NetBeans. Hold on just a second.
When I had copied and pasted what you did, it had gave me some errors.
Did you copy the class and the void in the main?
Nah, I just copied what I said.
The code right here?
The code, yeah.
What error did it give you?
It wants me to convert the for to a for loop and convert to a for loop, yeah.
Is it an error or is it just a suggestion?
I mean,
Is it red?
it's yellow.
Yellow is just a suggestion.
Oh, all right.
Does it run?
Is this how it's supposed to look?
Yep, it just prints out.
Yeah, it runs.
Yeah, that's why I'm using the visualizer so you can actually see what's happening in memory. NetBeans doesn't show you what's happening in memory. All right, any other questions? Okay, well, I'll try to have that PowerPoint done by tonight and up on the website. The link is already on the website. It's just when you click on it, it goes to an empty PowerPoint. But I'll try to have that done tonight and up there so that you guys can look at it and be prepared for Friday. Reminder, the reading quizzes have started. So the first reading quiz was today before class. The next reading quiz will be on Monday and then Wednesday, and we'll continue that process on throughout the semester. They are extra credit, they aren't required. So I encourage you to do them, but you don't have to. All right, if there's no other questions, that's it for today.